Hey everybody, welcome back to General Science. And today we're going to be talking about ecosystems and what those are and kind of how they shape the animals and their environments. Um, so let's get started. First of all, what is an ecosystem? Well, this is just a biological community with organisms that live together in an environment. So, an ecosystem is just a place where a lot of different species live and cooperate or fight and eat and live and survive. Um, and so ecosystems are really highly complex spaces. They've got all sorts of different plant life and animal life, and there could be some fungi and bacteria, and all those different things are all together. And so scientists like to look at different ecosystems, different spaces and groups, and really learn about the differences between them and kind of how they all work and interconnect and react together. And that's something biologists do. And so each ecosystem is a habitat for countless of different species of animals and plants, and like I said, all those different things. And so each habitat needs a variety of species to meet the needs of all the other species in them, right? So, there's certain animals aren't going to live in a place where they can't get food, right? So if their food doesn't exist in that ecosystem, they're going to live somewhere else. So those sorts of things do affect um, what lives in an ecosystem and how that's going to work. Speaking of food and eating, right? Ecosystems have what are called food chains. And a food chain is just the sequence of species and energy passes through in an ecosystem. So in Wisconsin, right? I live in Wisconsin, and a food chain might look like this. We've got lots of these nice trees and different grasses. There are certain small animals that eat those grasses, and they get the energy from that. Um, and mice eat those smaller animals, and so the mice will eat those. And then foxes might eat the mice, and then snakes and other sorts of animals might attack those foxes. And then hawks might eat those snakes and stuff like that. So there's a chain, right, at which the energy moves through the ecosystem, right? The trees are what are called producers. They produce the energy that that ecosystem is going to have. So all the plant life, they're known as producers because they make energy from some weird light things going on. They make energy from the light, the sunlight, and that energy then is dispersed throughout the food chain um, by animals eating those plants, and then other animals eating those animals, and other animals eating those animals, and so on. And that's really what a food chain is. And in those food chains, right, the trees, like I said, produce the energy, and as each species moving up the ladder eats its prey, the amount of energy that's transferred is going to become less and less and less, right? So the trees are going to produce all this energy, and the first thing that eats the tree is going to get a lot of energy out of it, okay? But it's going to use a lot of that energy, right? Because it needs that energy to survive and do what it's doing. And so then when the animal that eats that animal does that, it's going to be getting less energy out of that animal than the original animal got out of the tree, and so on. So energy, the amount of energy that's transferred as you go down the food chain is going to be less and less and less as you move forward. So that's something to think about. Also, usually things on the other end of the food chain are a lot bigger, and so they need a lot more energy to keep going. So that requires them to eat more and more, right? So there's instances for that too. And so these food chains, right, need to be maintained to keep these ecosystems going. And that's why a lot of ecosystems end up collapsing. It's because something in that food chain ends up getting wiped out. So, for instance, in the Amazon rainforest, right, loggers have been going through and chopping down all these trees, and those trees were the things that provided energy for the smaller things in the food chain. And now the larger things in the food chain, right, the foxes, the big cats, all the other things that live in the Amazon jungle that relied on those smaller animals for food, they're stuck because they don't have a food source anymore. And so those ecosystems have been wiped out, and animals have gone extinct because their food source has been wiped away. The same thing happens in other places too. You know, even in America, there are times, where if you build, if you're tearing down forests or you're destroying wild habitats, to build or progress or whatever the reason is, you could end up breaking up a fragile ecosystem and leading to the deaths of hundreds of animals. Um, so biologists really take an interest in ecosystems because it really helps us understand how, different species are able to survive in their environments, and what happens when we intervene, and how that could have negative consequences for these creatures that, um, shouldn't have to rely on our actions but do for their survival, unfortunately. So, that's what I've got about ecosystems. I hope that was informational and helpful for you. Next episode is going to be our last biology episode. We're going to talk about evolution. And then after that, we'll be moving on to our next science subject. So I hope you're looking forward to that. Thank you very much for watching. See you later.